It seems like we have a lot of new faces here tonight, so if you're new to the meeting, would you like to raise your hand, and if you are brave, you can stand up and introduce yourself. Start back there.
I'm Melissa Wells. I'm actually from Connecticut. I grew up in this county in Worc, Whitensville area. Lived in Connecticut for now over 20 years. But I've always been on your email distribution list, and what really got me to come out tonight was the fact that you have a millennial here somewhere who's going to speak to us, which is so important. So that's why I'm here.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Also from Connecticut. You were kind enough and allow me to be on your bus in the last trip to Washington.
That was awesome.
Nice. And thank you for having me. It was wonderful to be there, and I'm glad to be here tonight. Thank you.
I'm James Fleming. I'm from Grafton, Mass. I'm originally from Grafton, and now live in Boudreau. I've been getting emails for a while, but just wanted to get over and finally made it here.
Anyone else? Go ahead.
You can introduce all of us, Bobby. Speak for our Tea Party. Well, the three of us are from North Central Mass Tea Party. You came down to check out what you guys are doing. I'm Jason Boudreau. This is Bobby Newman.
I'm the president of the North Central Mass Tea Party.
The people that were asking if there was an open forum back in Facebook a few weeks back.
Mike Blaney, I'm a member of the North Central Tea Party, and I'm speaking tonight.
My name's Anthony Rizzoni. I'm up in Holden, member of the Holden, Rutland, Saxon, Leicester, every other town Tea Party that way. I'm also Holden Fleming. I'm here to speak, and I occasionally make it up to one of your meetings, but thanks for the invite. I'm looking forward to the meeting tonight.
Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Darlene. I'm from Holden, and I've also received a lot of emails, and I've gone to the North Central Tea Party meetings. It's finally coming up. It sounds like an interesting experience.
You want to introduce yourself?
I'm Mary. I'm from Holden, and I'm the North Central Party. Not on the email, but Darlene did encourage me to be active, and I'm glad I did.
Okay, thank you. I want to introduce our first speaker tonight. His name is James Boudreau. He's a local guy. He grew up in Leominster, currently lives in Berlin, has a company in Millbury. He's an entrepreneur, career entrepreneur. Maybe he'll talk a little bit about the companies he started. He's a consultant for small businesses, particularly startups, and he's the author of Exporting Prosperity, Why the U.S. Economy May Never Recover. And I hope he's wrong, but...
I do too.
So come on up, James.
Thank you, Ken, and thank you for the invitation to come speak. It's been an interesting journey. Writing a book. It wasn't something where I set out necessarily to be an author or to end up in meetings like this, but you never know where life's going to take you. As a very wise old philosopher, which I just learned is a comic character, once said, I've met the enemy and he is us. And I think that's probably one of the things that led me to write the book, is that as with the Tea Party movement, you just kind of get to a point where you just have had enough and you need to do something. And to quote, actually, Edmund Burke, among others, actually this quote is goes back to Plato in various forms, but all that it takes for the triumph, all that is necessary for the triumph of evil is that good men do nothing. So I got fed up enough with the state of affairs that I wrote a book. And what really led me to write the book was that I got tired of watching the news and hearing how much better things are getting. I have so many friends, as I'm sure do all of you, who are over 45, educated, hardworking, talented, and experienced, but have somehow found themselves right-sized, outsourced, downsized, etc., who have not been able to find a job in even a Home Depot for years. To me, that doesn't say things are getting better. I hear statistics like, oh, the unemployment rate is improving. It's only 7%. And I said, well, it doesn't make sense. How can our economy, how can our employment situation be improving if we keep seeing all that's happening to so many people? You see kids coming out of college taking a year to find a job. Talented, motivated, hardworking people taking a year, 2 years to get a job. And this isn't people who are just coasting on their unemployment. These are people who want to work, who hate getting an unemployment check. You know, it goes against everything they were raised on. You know, ironically, I always said I'd rather, sell pencils on a corner, which is kind of how I make a living now. I just have an internet store that sells stylus pens. So it's not all that different. But I finally got to a point where I said, this is a load of crap. I've got, somebody's got to do something. I just need to at least look into this. So I started to look into what do the unemployment numbers really mean. Because for a lot of people, I know that personally watching them, it feels as bad for them as it felt for my grandfather in the Great Depression. There was just, you're at the end of your rope. You watch the news, and this is one of those things that just intuitively you see that it just seems like more people are losing it. There are more shootings, there are more suicides, there's just more people reaching the end of their rope. And I think all you have to do is watch the news, which I refuse to do anymore. I'll go seek out the information I want, but I've gotten to a point where I can't even watch the news because it's either disconcerting or it's infuriating because you're listening to, a bunch of propaganda. So anyways, I started to look into what does unemployment really mean? And that was an enlightening experience because unemployment, you would think, bears some relationship to our population. It would make sense that a percentage of our population, or at the very least, a percentage of the people of working age. So I started doing a bunch of research. So I said, okay, well, we have roughly 318 million people live in this country. How many of them are of working age? 16 to 65. Forget how many people do we know that are working to 70, 72, 75 by need. And I found that just 16 to 65 is roughly 250 million people. So I said, okay, well, that must be the workforce. People able to work. And say, okay, we'll back out students and people who are disabled, unable to work. Obviously, that's reasonable. So that number's got to be, some factor diminished from 250 million. Then I found out that the U.S. workforce is 155 million. I said, okay, where's the gap? So when we talk about unemployment, we're talking about a percentage of the workforce, and that workforce is a highly arbitrary number. So basically, there's an old story of a couple of people interviewing to be the CFO of a big company. And who knows if this is urban legend, but they're interviewing with the CEO, and the CEO says, okay, as a final question I have for you, after all their interviewing, what's 2 plus 2? And of course, yeah. Well, the first two people, of course, say, well, 2 plus 2 is 4. The third person says, what number would you like it to be? Guess who got the job?
The third person,
Of course.
and he's a lawyer.
Well, yeah. Well, we can go down that road for a long time. But that's the problem with the numbers. You know, the media loves to put out all the feel-good numbers. Well, sure. All we have to do is reshape the workforce, and then the numbers look better. So, in any case, if you take the workforce number and take that out of the, shall we say, able-bodied workforce or the available to workforce, we have this gap of 100 million people. Almost 1/3 of the country is of working age, but is somehow not in the workforce. All right, now, we can take out of that 12 million college kids. Obviously, that makes sense. We can take out of that anywhere from 10 to 20 million people who are legitimately disabled, just physically or emotionally just incapable of work. That's more than fair. But then we start to get into certain other numbers which are really kind of twisted. Like if you've exhausted your unemployment benefits, don't have a job, can't find a job, but aren't collecting from the government, you're not unemployed. That was the one that really got me. So today we have roughly our unemployment 7% plus or minus of the 150 million plus or minus that is the workforce. But then you have another half again who want nothing more than to work, but they can't find a job. And I'm talking any job. And I know these people personally. Again, that's what inspired me to go on this mission. So real unemployment is more like 11 or 12% of the workforce, mind you. Okay, and then the other one, and this is it's amazing when you pour over volumes and volumes of spreadsheets and statistics, trying to find the common thread, the aha moments that you find. One of the great ones in the Bureau of Labor Statistics is, and this is a category, people who are able to work but don't want a job. That was a really good one. That is somewhere around 80 million people, plus or minus. 80 million people don't want, now granted, there might be 20 million out there that are millionaires, well off, retired, don't need the money, okay. But we're still talking, no matter how you cut it, somewhere 40 to 60 million people that are not contributing to our economy in any way, shape, or form. They may not necessarily be taking from it, but they certainly aren't contributing to it. So the first thing that made me nuts and got me to sit at the keyboard for countless hours was unemployment. My grandfather lost his business in the Depression. He was a jeweler. He and his father in the roaring 20s, very prosperous time in this country. And the Depression came along, and they lost everything. He didn't say a word till the day he died when he was 84. He worked until he was 84. Eventually he became a jeweler again, a watchmaker, and the little local town watchmaker fixed everybody's watches. And the WPA came up. So he just walked in, they handed him a shovel, and he went and dug ditches 5 years. He didn't dig ditches for EBT cards and lobster and whatever else you could buy with the 3 or 4 EBT cards. They're pretty easy to get. He did it for $5 a week. That $5 a week had to buy whatever meat, produce that you couldn't buy, grow, or hunt, and coupons. And the coupons were good for specific staples. Flour, sugar, powdered milk, powdered eggs. I mean, basically all you could get with these coupons was powdered something. But guess what? They made do. My father grew up in that. He was born in 1932, right at the height of the Depression. And he learned that you want anything, you work. I mean, when I was a kid, I remember. He would say, you know, you want a new pair of sneakers? Get a job. I don't care if you're 7. You know, snow day wasn't, for me, a snow day wasn't, okay, get out the PlayStation or the Xbox. Snow day was, okay, break out the duct tape. Okay, because we had to tape my gloves to the jacket and the boots to try and keep me some amount of not dead. Because that meant out the door, and of course my mother's got me by the back of the neck, till 8 o'clock on the nose in the morning. Because if I dared knock on one of my neighbor's doors before 8 o'clock, I would be killed. And I knew that I had to be home at 8 o'clock at night, because if I knocked on any of my neighbor's doors after 8 o'clock at night, I'd be killed. But in that 12 hours in between, I shoveled every driveway, every walk, everything I could find. I had 2 folded up tuna fish sandwiches in baggies in my pockets that were more like tuna fish pudding of some sort by midday, but that was what I had to eat because you can't come home for lunch because, you know, that's time away from shoveling snow. Now, to me, that was a great day. I loved the snow day, not because I wasn't in school, but because I could be out working. And that stuck with me. So like many people today, I cannot imagine, and I'm fortunate enough to have my own company and skills and connections that I have options for how I can make a living. I can do some consulting, I can run my business, I can do different things. I'm very, very fortunate. But I cannot imagine somebody who works in a trade, works in an industry that is highly skilled, highly educated, but cannot find a job. Now, in any economy, there's all sorts of things that are trickle-down effects. So the unemployment to me, while it's a painful situation, still to me is a symptom. I said there had to be something else going on in our economy, some other glaring statistic that nobody wants to talk about. And it has to somehow equate to jobs. Well, I looked at about every statistic there was. One of the big ones, you know, you hear, oh, the GDP, gross domestic product, the measure of our overall total economy, you know, that holy, holy number GDP. Well, I'll tell you what, all you have to do is let the population grow, especially in a consumer economy, and your economy grows naturally. So I looked at GDP, but then I looked at it per capita, per person. If you look at the GDP, our gross domestic product, and you divide it by the population, for more than 20 years, the GDP has grown at twice the rate of per capita GDP. You know, when everything around you is growing and you're not, you know, it's kind of like prices going up 3% and your cost of living increase on your Social Security goes up 1.5. It just sooner or later, it just gets a little harder and a little harder and a little harder. And while per capita GDP doesn't tie to personal income directly, it certainly does tie to how much money there is in the economy total to be spread around between companies and jobs and industries. So I said, well, where's that going? And this was the thing that really was the aha moment. I looked at the trade deficit. And we have, in the last 20 years, imported $9.5 trillion more than we've exported. Okay? $9.5 trillion. Okay? Now, if you take an economy, you know, economists, you know, I would love to have a debate with an economist because they, you know, they'll run off into theories about Keynes and Friedman and every other economist. And I say, well, fine, that's the science. You know, I can do the math, that's easy. Tell me how that translates to something practical. So I said, all right, well, I'm going to take an economy and I'm going to put it in a vacuum, and I'm going to take a little town, or better yet, a tribe in the Amazonian jungle. And they got about 100 individuals. And picture these 100 people surviving for a couple centuries as a community. Now you have some people are the hunters, some people are the farmers, some people take care of the kids. It's a universal cooperative society where everyone's needs are met because everyone contributes. But what happens if all of a sudden you take 10% of the food you grow in the shall we say the community farm, and you just give it to another community that wants it? Doesn't necessarily need it, but they want it, so you say, oh, great, all right, we're going to take 10% of our corn, we're going to give it to you. So everybody here in our community is going to go on a diet. You used to have a nice, even, balanced 100% of what you needed, no more, no less, but now you have to deal with 90%. Say, okay, I can do that. But these other people are going to buy stuff from us, right? Well, no. No, we're just going to give it to them. Now, next year, we have to go on another diet. We have to do 90% of our 90%. And year after year after year after year. So all of a sudden, where's all our corn? Why are we so hungry? You know, you just kind of wake up and you say, well, it didn't seem like that big a deal. It was only a little bit. Well, guess what? For the last 20 years, we've taken $400 to $500 billion and sent it offshore somewhere to someone who said, thank you very much, and have a nice day. Now, some of the traditional economists would say, well, eventually it all evens out. If you go back to, say, the 70s, call it I hate to use the word predator, but the nation that took greatest advantage of our kind-heartedness, if not naivete, was Japan. Japan was Sony and Nissan and countless companies who made cheaper products than we did. If you go back, for any of you who remember buying a 1973 Datsun 280Z, okay? The trick was to get your 80,000 miles out of it before it fell apart. Because the rust, sooner or later, turned into dust. You would just walk out one day, you put the key in the door, and there was a little pile of rust. But they were cheap. Now, what happened was, you take Japan, who had an economy roughly 35% the size of ours, we keep buying enough Japanese goods. Sooner or later, their standard of living comes up and equals ours. So our gift one of our gifts to Japan was we gave Japan an economy equivalent to ours. Of course, that hurt us for a while. It put all the U.S. Electronics companies out of business. Can't buy any electronics unless they're military electronics, stuff that we don't want to share. And we gave up half our steel industry. So, okay, yeah, that was the cost. So we'll find some other jobs. We'll find some other industries to get into. And eventually, Japan and the U.S. had the same size economy. Now then Japan, a very wise country, said, well, we can't compete on labor anymore, so they competed on quality. They remade themselves to be a company that focuses on quality and innovation. But there's this, all of a sudden, we have this thirst for cheap electronics. We can now have more than one TV. I mean, when I was a kid, 19-inch, this thing was, it was a piece of furniture. You bought your TV at the furniture store. That's who sold TVs. My dad was a TV repairman. He was like big in the 50s. He'd come to your house, climb the roof, try and tie himself to the chimney and hang an antenna on your roof so you could watch, the big three, 4, 5, and 7. And, that was heaven. But as a family, you united around that. My father united around the radio when he was a kid. He actually heard Orson Welles' War of the Worlds broadcast live. But it was a family thing. The TV was, wasn't a go hide in your room. Your punishment is you have to watch by yourself, and your kid's like, cool. What wrong can I do now? But it was an investment to buy a television set, not one of 6, in the house, each with its own DVD player and Xbox and everything else you can connect to it. But we became starved. This was the start of consumerism. I can have everything I want, and I can have it all for $12. That was the beginning. So we then moved to Korea, because that was the next cheap labor market that was capable of building an infrastructure to manufacture electronics and so on. Well, guess what? We were kind enough to elevate the Korean economy. Sooner or later, fortunately, Korea is a smaller country than we are, smaller than Japan, so it didn't hurt us that much, again, or so we thought, other than perpetuating our mindset. But then China came along. Imagine what it would take all of us to elevate 500 million Chinese workers to our standard of living, to our soon-to-be, $30 minimum wage. Picture $30 an hour, $20 an hour, even $10 an hour, times 40 hours, times 500 million people. Oh, by the way, India's got another 500 million. Philippines, Malaysia, another 50 million. So, guess what? All that money we keep sending offshore, despite all of our wishes and wants, is not coming back. $9.3 trillion and counting. $500 million a year. You know what that translates to? 5 million U.S. jobs that cost the company $50,000. For any of you have never worked in a payroll department or run a company, for you to make $30,000 in this country costs the company $50,000 a year. So a basic job, but that's those middle class jobs that have all but disappeared. So 5 million people could be out there making $30,000 a year for that amount of money. But it's gone. What's worse is if you look at certain jobs, certain skills. All right, I'm gonna ask this question. If you're over 30, you can't answer. Over 32. How many of you know what a tanner is? Okay. How many of you know what a tool and die maker is? Yeah. Okay.
No, because anybody here.
I'll give you a good one. We have how many techies we have in the room? Okay. How many of you know what a key punch operator is?
Yep.
Okay. Here's all these jobs that are gone. Now, it's not necessarily that the job is gone that's the tragedy, although that is tragic in and of itself. What's most tragic is that skills are gone. We've wiped out entire trades. Tool and die makers. If you want to make toys, you need to know how to make, you need to be able to make plastic molds to make plastic parts. So a tool and die, one of the jobs a tool and die maker would make. We don't know how to do that anymore. See, we at some point got out there and we started saying, rather than lay off the people with lower seniority, and my dad was a victim of this when he was 60, we decided that we need to lay off our most expensive employees. So everybody, from this area knows Digital Equipment Corporation, or DEC. DEC was famous. They gave so many people jobs that had no skills, and just built this massive company that almost couldn't sustain itself under its own weight. And then when they started getting competition from the PC, they didn't adapt. When they didn't adapt, they started to shrink. So what did they do? They didn't get rid of all the younger people with lower seniority. They got rid of all the people who had the most skill and the most experience, because they cost the most. Well, guess what? They cost the most for a reason. They got rid of all the people who could have fixed the company. So we keep shuffling all these skills offshore along with all that money. So, again, I kept digging deeper. And I'm sure everybody has heard, one place or another, we live in a consumer economy. Well, guess what? So do locusts. What happens in Kansas when the locusts show up? Total decimation. Everything's gone. And what do they do when they're done? Do they replant the fields that they just destroyed? Well, they just go somewhere else. Consumer economy is not sustainable. Yet 71%. That was a number I just found today. Let me go see if I can find anything interesting that's changed in the last few months since I, finished the book. 71% of our economy is go out and buy stuff, which is crazy. And what ends up happening when we go, where do we go buy stuff? Walmart, Target, all the big box retail. So yeah. Why? Because we can get more stuff for that same dollar.
Is that wrong? Is that bad? That we get more for that dollar? What's the difference between somebody's income going up and their expenses going down? Are they still more rich or more
Put it
wealthy?
this way, it's easy to justify
It is.
when we don't think of it being at the expense of our neighbor.
Yeah, that's like right.
Okay? And that's where, when I say
So should we have not invented electricity because the candle maker would be put out of business? Because that's at the expense of our neighbor, right? I really think that I'm sorry to do this, because I know you're a guest, and I'm one of the leaders of this organization, but economic policy is missing from your theory.
not yet. I'm not there yet.
When dollars are sent to
products from Japan or from China in dollars, what are they gonna do with dollars? They're not gonna wear them, they gotta spend them, they have to spend them. It isn't like corn where you send corn to somebody and they eat it and then it's gone. We buy the products with dollars, those dollars have to be spent, and you have to understand monetary theory to understand that when you spend a yen to buy products, dollars are just pieces of cotton. So you have to move that money to the monetary, or through the economy in order to do it. So that money does come back.
Oh, I understand what you're saying. And you know how it comes back? They loan it to us.
Right, that's the problem. But it's
So,
not the
so,
issue that
so they
they're
loan it to us,
buying
and then we pay them back with interest, so we give them even more money.
Right, so it's the deficit spending. You're right, you're absolutely right, it's deficit spending, but it's not the fact that we're buying cheap products. The fact that we can buy more from China is a benefit to us. It's a huge benefit. The fact that I can spend $700 on a 65-inch television and not $2,000 is because that gives me a net of $1,250 to spend on something else. So I strongly recommend that you study more monetary theory and economic
Okay,
theory.
I have an MBA, I've studied
So do I.
an immense amount of economic theory,
Good.
and what you're ignoring is human nature.
That's right.
I'm not. I'm not.
You're also ignoring the fact that $9.3 trillion is gone.
It's not, because
It's
$9.6
not here.
trillion go to, okay, what do people in China do with $9.3 trillion when they spend R&D?
They buy heavy equipment from Japan and Germany and other countries.
With
Yuan. I mean, they're even
not
talking about
dollars. So they have to do something with
but those dollars aren't coming back to us.
So you're saying that they bury them in the ground?
They hold them.
Right, because we borrow from them. The issue is borrowing, it's not spending. The fact is that the government borrows money from China in order to finance our social welfare programs. And that you're exactly right, but what you're missing is not the purchase of cheaper products from China. The issue is borrowing. If we had a zero balance in our economy in relation to borrowing for these programs, it would be a non-issue. Every dollar that goes out to purchase something would come back to the United States eventually.
Well, it hasn't in more than 30 years.
It hasn't
Since
because
1970.
but it's not
No, the government deficit, the financial deficit, the government's deficit is a completely separate issue.
He's talking about bills and rates, he's talking about the budget.
But it's the same, but
It isn't the
not
same.
different from each other.
It is not the same. And if you let me continue,
Okay, go ahead.
if I'm a company making product, selling product, and I put you out of work, are you going to buy my product? You can't. You cannot buy products from me if you have no money. And that's the problem. With a trade deficit, we keep putting people out of work, then those people cannot consume because they don't have any money. Unless we borrow it and put it into a government program and then send more of it to China. And exactly, what happens to every dollar you give in stimulus money? It goes to whatever disenfranchised group or legitimately needy group gets it, who gives it to Walmart, and off it goes. Okay? So sure, do I think it's great to save $1,200? When I say in the book, when I put in the title, why the U.S. economy may never recover, that mentality is why. Because you let me speak. Oh, we'll have plenty of time for Q&A. Because we will not make that sacrifice for our neighbor. You go look at towns that live based on their manufacturing industry. If you went to Michigan, before Detroit died, and few would disagree that Detroit as a regional economy, as a center of activity, Detroit is dead. Okay? Few would argue that. If you go back before they died, you go back 20 years, try and drive a Honda. You would be killed. All right? Because these people understood firsthand that what they drove for a direct relationship to their ability to feed their families. You know why Henry Ford paid the best wages and built the least expensive and tried to figure out every way he could to make cheap cars or inexpensive cars so that his employees could afford them? Because if you make a product that your own workers cannot afford, sooner or later, everything dries up. And that's the problem we have. We can't make a decent wage, so we have to buy cheap stuff. We can't buy more expensive stuff. What if, for example, money wasn't an object? And you know what? I haven't looked at the studies yet, but they're out there. What if you have more money than God, and you can walk in and you see two TVs, and they are identical in every way, shape, and form? Features, specifications, quality, etc. One is $600, one is $1,200. The $1,200 one is made by your neighbor. Even people for whom money is not an issue will buy the $600 TV. Makes sense. It's hard to condemn, but it's killing us. And that's the reality. It absolutely is true.
Not true, man. I don't want to debate you, but it's not true, man. The money saved gives somebody more expendable power to be able to buy other goods. If somebody's more productive, the issue is not the fact that it costs more because of the unions and minimum wage and that kind of thing. That's why it costs more. And that's the issue. The issue is not...
Oh, I won't disagree with you there.
Yeah, that's why it costs more. It's not...
Oh, I haven't even gotten to the point, which, again, the book goes into all these points. All right? Stuff does cost far too much to make here.
Right.
That is part of the problem.
Huge.
You know,
But John, the issue is that we've lost the jobs that we are probably designed to do because it's too expensive to do here, but we have not replaced them with jobs that people can do. And so when people are out of work, we have to pay them to not work.
Right, but the problem, you're describing a symptom and not the problem. The problem is the minimum wage and the fact that unions are allowed to be above and beyond the law, so they have special rights. You can't fire somebody in a union because they're a part of a union and they're a protected class or group of people. That's the problem. But the fact that I can buy a better car that's created in Korea or China isn't hurting the economy. It gives me the ability to spend my money in other places where we're more productive to be able to do it. You have to read Milton Friedman, and I know you said don't read them or that they're not right, but Milton Friedman is correct that productivity is best where it's able to be produced the least expensive, and that each economy should be able to produce what it's being produced.
I've read Friedman, and I agree with him in theory, but that means we all play by the same rules.
If you're right, why isn't there long-term unemployment going up after all these issues?
It is. We're just counting different people differently.
Yeah, and I'm not, the first portion of, let me just first say, the first portion of your presentation was excellent, I completely agree, and I would like you to please research in my theory, the roaring 20s and the 30s and the 40s were horrible because socialism and minimum wages started coming in, and that's why we saw this. But I think in the last portion of your presentation, I have to be honest.
It's not the last. It's about a quarter of the way. So you won't let me get to the other part.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
See, the other part actually is a little bit more refreshing and a little bit more in what you're trying to say, but you got to let me actually get to it.
Okay, please go ahead.
I think we have one other question.
Well, actually, it was more of a comment. I think what John's alluding to is the difference in the freedom of the markets. In the U.S. economy, because there's been distortions in the markets, whether it's government interference, regulation, and which part of that extends into how the unions are allowed to, in many cases, run things and how they're given preferential treatment. That distorts the U.S. economy. And that's why you can maybe say get a $30,000 car of rough equivalency of quality from a U.S. automaker versus a foreign automaker. And you think about the foreign automaker, they have to get everything over here. They have to put it across, on ocean liners going across the ocean, et cetera. So there's a larger cost involved with that. And there's a higher labor cost in the U.S. and there's a lower labor cost there, but there's more cost getting the product. So,
And it depends on the product.
Right.
Okay.
Well, absolutely.
The other thing too, and this is where Friedman's wrong, is you got to be playing by the same rules. Now in China, and I do business with companies in China, you know the Chinese companies don't pay their workers? The government pays all Chinese workers. The companies pay the government to basically rent the labor. So when you get product made for you in China, there is no labor cost. So for example, if you take a shirt and you make that shirt here, let's presume that woven cotton costs roughly the same amount of money to grow it, get it out of the farm, weave it into cloth, and you've got a skein of cloth here and a skein of cloth here, one in China, one here. Well, now you've got to turn it into a shirt. Well, the cost to turn it into a shirt in China is 0. The cost to turn that into a shirt here is 20. Okay? We are not playing by the same rules. Okay? And that's the thing Friedman developed his theories at a time when the global economy played by the same rules because giant socialist economies like China, India, and many other parts of the world weren't competing with us. So it was real easy to operate in that vacuum. But when you're dealing in a world economy that has 2 billion workers compared to our 200 million, we cannot compete. There is no way we will ever equalize things. And as long as we can't, then we're in trouble. Now, what do? You very aptly put unions, high labor costs, government intervention, all these things. I own a business. Trust me. I have Uncle Sam's, hands and Uncle Patrick's hands in every pocket. In fact, I have to wear a vest with extra pockets because, they run out of places to put them. Okay? It makes me absolutely want to vomit when I think of how much money I give this state, blah, blah, blah. Now you start talking about waste, all right, unions. Let's just say unions had a great place in this country 90, 100 years ago when you could tell how long someone worked in a profession by how many fingers he had left. There's reasons for organized labor. Guess what? We did manage to come up with labor laws and a reasonable system of mitigating those risks. But when you take, and this first happened in the steel industry, when the companies who spent so much money on unions and negotiations and lawyers and everything else, they could no longer modernize their factories. There was nothing left after they paid for all the graft and inefficiency. So finally, it reached a breaking point in the first oil crisis in '73 when the cost of producing steel went through the roof because of energy costs. The steel industry owners finally said, you all have to take a pay cut. They said to the unions, we are going out of business if you don't take a 10% pay cut. And so the unions said, nope. So rather than everybody taking a 10% pay cut, half of them took a 100% pay cut. okay, which is exactly. I don't care what happens to my neighbor as long as I don't lose my 10%.
That was the GM plant back in the 1980s in Framingham. It was the
GM?
same union thing. They were negotiating, and GM said, look, you can take a cut and keep your jobs and keep the plant open. They said no, and guess what? The Framingham GM plant, no more.
Exactly. And where are cars made in this country now? Tennessee, Alabama, Canada, Ohio, and Mexico.
And I remember that because I toured that plant as a high school kid.
Okay, how many of you love Twinkies?
It's the same thing.
Okay, personally, I never understood it, but it is the only substance man has ever produced that can survive nuclear winter. If we ever have a giant global nuclear, cataclysm, have Twinkies in your basement, you will survive for eons.
You mean you guys don't?
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
I mean, seriously,
Yeah.
come on.
Personally, it was ring ding, but But here's another case where you had a factory in Texas losing money year after year after year, making Twinkies, and they said to the union, "Look, we can't. It isn't even a matter of fat cats getting fat and people making too much money and those pig executives, taking all the money. It's losing money. That there's no more pie to divvy up." And they said, "We're going out of business if you don't take a pay cut." Their brilliant union leadership said, "Nope, no pay cut. No more Twinkies."
Just a quick comment. Actually, what was very interesting about the Twinkie situation was that there was a company, an investment firm that took them over that was trying to save the company from a pro, we want to save the company type situation. We want to do the best thing for the workers. So it was actually a very pro-labor group that had taken over the company, was trying to turn it around, but they still could not deal with the unions because the unions would not budge, period.
Well, and again, that's ignorance.
On whose part?
And
Labor's.
absolutely. Oh, I'm not talking about greed on the corporate side. I'm looking at greed on the labor side. Okay, because
it's the same people who will pay $600 for a Japanese-made television rather than buy the American-made television for $1,200. It's the same screw your neighbor attitude. Are you surprised?
Absolutely.
We're all human.
How many of you own an iPhone or an Apple phone? Okay, how many Droids or Motorola's?
I used to until they changed the OS and then I couldn't stand it anymore.
Yeah, well, we do have to produce better products. That was one of the lessons of the 70s. You can't make crap. You can't make cars that blow up. But Apple, here's another one. No one thinks when I buy an Apple product, I'm screwing my neighbor. Apple did $146 million in sales last year. Made $1 billion in sales. Made a $50 billion profit. 1/3. It was like 27.9% net profit. That's insane. That's like an ATM machine, just throwing money out. You know how many jobs they employ? How many people they employ in the U.S.? 50,000.
Productive group.
They're roughly the size. Of Walmart, and they employ like 1%. Walmart employs 1. Well, it's very different. Granted, it's very different, but you look at $50 billion in profit. You know how many Apple products are made in this country? 0. Not one single Apple product is made in this country.
Where are they
China, all China.
Where are they designed? And where are they created?
They're engineered in California.
Right. Here.
Here.
Ask Ken about his neighbor down the street, IPG Photonics, the world headquarters, laser manufacturers, owned by a Russian scientist. They're growing like there's no tomorrow. In this country, in this state, your neighbor just down the street
Sure.
in Oxford.
But because they're doing something better.
Ask Ken about his company, growing.
And cannot ever find enough skilled labor, ever.
Right.
We could hire 5 or 6 more skilled machinists if we could find them, but we can't.
And why not? Why can't we find them? You know why?
We wipe
You know
those skills
what?
out.
No, we don't teach it anymore. We teach social, it's okay to be not sure if you're a boy or a girl. It's okay if you're pregnant in junior high school. What, are you laughing? You don't believe this?
No, we don't. We don't teach actual stuff anymore.
It doesn't matter anymore. Because you can go out, get an EBT card, and do whatever you want.
I agree.
It's not because he wants to buy the better product or the cheaper product. It's because the government is out of control. It's a fraud. It's a fraud.
Absolutely. Well, when our education system, when we do things like no Child Left Behind, which basically dumbs down our curriculum so that everyone can pass and doesn't do anything for the gifted child that can help them excel and develop advanced skills, of course we're screwed.
The federal government should get out of education. Right back to the
The federal government should get out of everything. But, however, the problem we have is, and Ken, you're going to have to wave at me when I'm running out of time here.
We're getting close. I'd say another 5-6 minutes.
Okay. The thing is, we have other issues. Okay, one, education is another one. We are not developing skills. The Chinese education system, socialist or not, is very astute because what they do is when you're like a youngster, you begin aptitude testing. And if you have a natural aptitude to be a mathematician, to be an artist, to be a craftsman, your educational path is mapped. So you go through, we don't know. You're being sarcastic.
I'm not. I believe people should choose their own path and not the government should choose it for them. Oh, I'm crazy.
No, they don't know. They are allowed.
Oh, okay. They're allowed.
They're not, the gun is not held to their head. But the point is, they are developing people's curriculum based on their potential, not based on the lowest common denominator. Okay? The other thing is,
we take care of the athletic athletes in our schools.
we take care of those who don't produce. It's about producing. It's about contributing to the fiber and fabric of society, the economy, etc. That can't be done without education. Yeah.
You know, they're thinking about the whole education. When we were in school, you get an A, you get an E. When I was growing up in the 60s and 70s, now everyone has to be the same. Is that emphasis on fairness and kind of utopian, socialistic?
That's pure socialism.
Mediocrity. And so you're right. The gifted child is being ignored. There's such a need to look at differences to the degree where if you have if you just have one script, everybody has to be the same. And I'm a therapist, and I hear this from clients and parents that tell me about their kids and the schools, and I wouldn't send my kids to these schools now.
It's horrific.
So, but I think it's that socialistic, this whole trend with our country income inequality. And natural labor review board, the whole thing we have, even with Boeing, recently Boeing needed to get their contract. The unions, because they almost left, I think the state of Washington, it's all the need to have everything be equal, the unions reign, even in the schools.
I agree.
Yeah.
The problem is we as a society condemn difference.
Right.
Okay? As opposed to say, okay, you and I can debate economic theory all day long, but we have to be able to agree to disagree, and we have to say, well, how do we balance all interests? Okay? Because whether we like it or not, there are other economic forces in the world who prey upon our weaknesses. The fact that we will buy that $600 TV, they're going to take as much money as we will send them. Okay? Whether we like it or not. Now, what can we do? Well, but I think it was funny. I talked to Patrick Humphreys on the phone and he was, oh, you're Patrick? Okay. He says, you aren't going to be all doom and gloom, are you? I said, no. He says, can we ever get out of this? Well, yeah, we can get out of it, but it requires a level of unselfishness, okay? It requires participating in the consumer economy at the minimal level possible. Save your money. Buy American. There is a huge, if you go look online, there is a huge, buy American movement around the country. The other thing we have to do, besides supporting our neighbor, is we have to protect intellectual property. What has driven our economy for all of its success, for our history as a country, is our ability to innovate. The ability to innovate comes from respecting differences, embracing other points of view, looking at a guy like Nikola Tesla like he's brilliant, not like he's a nut. Just because you don't understand what he's doing today doesn't mean it may not be a contribution tomorrow and therefore is entitled to some protection. Today, intellectual property, whether it be patents, trademarks, copyrights, etc., is only protected to the extent to which you can afford to defend it. If your neighbor comes up with a better mousetrap than you, or you come up with a better mousetrap and your neighbor, and you can't afford the legal fees, your neighbor can just sit there and rip it off, and too bad. You cannot afford to fight it. Okay? Our intellectual property protection system in this country has to be reformed. Now that's part and parcel to education and innovation. This whole country was founded on the premise of free thinking, carving out our own destiny, and preserving and protecting the ideas of the individual. And until we are willing to make our sacrifices ourselves in choosing how we spend our money, where we spend our money, how we invest our time and energy, and upholding some level of moral compass, then we aren't ever going to get out of this. Because unless we start to look out for our neighbors, unless this country becomes a community again, then we are in trouble. Other than that, I don't know if we have any time for questions, Ken, but I'm done blabbering. Okay. Well, I thank you for all your hospitality.
Meet with him. Don't worry. Hey!
Is this thing on? Can you hear me?
Everybody knows I speak very loudly and very clearly, and that is why I have risen such prominence in the Worcester Tea Party.
It's Matt from Marlboro, if you're not familiar.
I never met him before.
Yes, I have earned the V.
Does look like Phil Clinton.
I do feel your pain. Thank you for less. All right. A challenge that is the Worcester Tea Party, all the Tea Party movements are facing, is instilling patriotism in the young, is getting that seed of love of country in the hearts of young people, to get our message to the next generation of patriots. Our next speaker is a man who's worked tirelessly in doing that here in this state. He has been bringing this message to colleges and universities, to the people who we really should be referring to as the next generation of leaders of our Commonwealth and our nation. Nathan Patel recently graduated from UMass with a degree in political science and a minor in Spanish. During his time at UMass, he founded and ran the New England Objectivist Society. Nathan helped forge links between conservative and libertarian groups on campus. Nathan distributed hundreds of copies of the books of Ayn Rand, sharing her insights with many that had never heard of them before.
Nathan is still focused on young people, but has expanded his activities locally and statewide. Nathan continues to work to activate young people's civic sense and to help them join political movements so that they can do their part in the patriotic cause of liberty. Nathan Patel.
I don't know who that is, sorry. How's everyone doing? Thanks for having me. Thank you for that beautiful introduction, Matt. It's a pleasure to be here. So my voice hasn't cracked in a few hours. If it does, I apologize. I am a little bit sick. And I'm new to this public speaking thing, so please be patient with me. Now, as Matt said, I recently graduated. And by recently, I mean about a day or two ago. That's when my last day I graduated early, but it was an accident because I got ahead on credits. I didn't know it was happening. It just happened. So that very last, well, I'll basically what I'm going to do here, I'll give you a quick introduction, and then I'll go back into the context, is I'll tell you a little bit about what I did during my time at UMass. And I'll tell you about what I'm doing right now, and then what you can do to help me. Or not me specifically, but us as a whole. Well, I don't like that. I don't like that word.
Hey, this is an interesting juxtaposition. Buy your neighbor's products and the religion of selfishness.
Well, I'm not going to, thankfully for all of you, I'm not going to get into religion or economics. What I am going to do is talk about how I've gradually gotten better at messaging, at marketing liberty, if you will. So real quick with the boring stuff or less interesting stuff, I did start doing on deck of the society, and basically what we did was we handed books out. We had meetings, but not a lot of people went to them, and I'll get into that. But I want to give you some context. I want to give you some background to the context that I've been in for 3.5 years. 3.5, not 4. So my last class, the last class ever that I just got my grade back from was at Mount Holyoke College. It was called Pivotal Ideas Conservatism. And I don't know how much you know about Mount Holyoke College, or UMass for that matter, but UMass is in the habit of only hiring Marxists for the econ department. And Mount Holyoke is in the habit of churning out feminists like it's nobody's business. So I was sitting, every Thursday I had a class with, I don't know, 12 or so girls and the professor, who was also a woman, all of whom were basically the same. They all had this preconceived notion that anything having anything to do with our founding principles and with rational self-interest and with freedom is bad. Don't worry, this context is important. So we covered a lot of different thinkers, and there was always this really negative tone, and it was that, oh my God, conservatives, they must be bad. They want lower taxes, and then how would we pay for all the free health care? So it was tough. Being at UMass was tough, and this class at Mount Holyoke was tough. But the hardest part, though, was when we came to the section on Ayn Rand and Friedrich Hayek, because that is a section that has the least to do with logic and the most to do with emotion. And the professor spent a lot of time saying, well, I don't like those thinkers because they don't really get what it means to be human. And she never challenged their logic, she never challenged their economics, she never challenged anything that they actually said. She just said, they don't get what it means to be human. So I spend most of my time in that class basically like this.
Did you pass and did you speak up?
I did speak up. I got a lot of funny looks. I got some interesting comments on my papers, but ultimately, I felt like my contributions were somewhat valued, and I got an A.
Good for you.
So how does that tie into what I've been doing? Well, the way it ties in is that is not anything new in any way, shape, or form. For 4 years, 3.5, really forever, but especially in the last 3.5 years, this is all I've heard. In every class, in every way, shape, and form, in every department, everywhere, it's saturated with this mentality that our lives don't belong to us. And I'll give you a few examples. Sorry, it's been a long week. I haven't done a ton of preparation, so I will be looking down a little bit. So I'll give you a few examples. I had a TA who insisted that we need to ban the financial markets. I had a professor who said that if you're an alcoholic, you caught the alcoholism disease. You're not responsible for that. I had, the list goes on. Let's see, who else was there? I had an anthropology professor who insisted that America was an evil empire. I had 40 occupiers hijack a lecture that I hosted with a speaker from the Ayn Rand Institute. I had to fight the SGA so I could put up my own flyers without their logo on it. This is the kind of stuff I dealt with every day. And it really was the same every day. And I never forgot about it because every day there would be hundreds of people that just passed by when I was tabling or doing whatever with this deer in headlights stare. And part of the reason is because I was doing it wrong, and I'll get to that. But there it goes.
Well, Marco Rubio moment.
I took the label off. So all of those professors and ignorant students and whoever else, there was a shared theme. And it was that your life does not belong to you. It belongs to other people. It belongs to everyone else but you. It belongs to your neighbors. It belongs to a race, a country, whatever. You can put it however you want, but it doesn't belong to you. And that was the assumption that they always made, and they never even articulated it because it's been around for thousands of years. Why articulate something that everyone knows? We all grew up with it. So that's where I came in. My project for the last 3.5 years has been to figure out just how to market this idea that your life does in fact belong to you, that you're the master of your own life, of your own wallet, of your own bedroom, that you should not be told what to do by the government or a church or whatever. Your life is yours. Right, John?
Exactly.
Yeah. So it was hard. It was really hard, and it continues to be hard. For a long time, I would spend hours upon hours tabling with no response. People would just walk by. I would speak up in classes and be laughed at either by fellow students or by professors. I would write papers which challenged preconceived norms about healthcare or things like that, just assuming that everyone has a right to it. And I would get these vicious comments back from TAs, one of whom insisted that there shouldn't be banks. Go figure. I would email people and get no response. I could go on, and there were so many reasons to be discouraged, but I just kept going because every now and then I saw hope. And that's when in those few moments when I saw hope, I realized that I was doing something wrong. And what I was doing wrong is that I was trying to preach to a choir that wasn't there. And I'll tie this into the Tea Party and what we're all trying to accomplish together, because the problem with that is it's great to find people we agree with. That's what I want to do. But we have to do more than just get a bunch of people who agree with each other in the same room. We can all do a lot of things together, but not as much as we can do if we enlarge the choir that we're preaching to, if you will. That's what I was doing wrong. Is that, sorry. That I was always out there passing out copies of Atlas Shrugged and just hoping that there would be people who have already read it. Be like, oh, you've read that, then we agree on things, we should be friends. And it didn't occur to me until much later that I had to appeal to something deeper in all people to be able to get more people to agree with me, not just reach the ones I already agreed with. So I kept giving out books, but I changed my approach a little bit. I started talking to students about who they are, what they study, things like that. Anyone read Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People? Very good, sir. It's a great book. There's a lot of repetition. It's kind of dry. He gets a few things wrong. But the point is that people want to be recognized for their values, right? And everyone deep down has that value of wanting to be, well, okay, most people, even really deep down, want to be self-sufficient in some regard. They're in college, maybe just because they want to escape from their parents, or they're taking a job just because they don't want to be at home. Maybe they have really superficial reasons for doing what they do, but everyone wants to be in control of their own life. So somehow, based on what I got from each person in 5 to 20 seconds, I would tailor the message differently and convince someone who I've never met before, who has never heard of Ayn Rand or Atlas Shrugged, or this explicit idea that their life belongs to them, that they should read this, or that they should just consider what I have to say. And something changed. So instead of meeting people who I agreed with, I made more people who I agreed with. And all of a sudden, the mailing list started growing, and I was turning all these people away from the table. Whoa, that sounds bad. I was sending all these people back to their dorm rooms with a copy of Atlas Shrugged and with a genuine interest in reading it that they didn't have before. So that's one stage of improvement. Okay, well, what I did different is I started out by just assuming that there would be other people around that would just agree with me. I just wanted to be in an echo chamber, basically. I just wanted to be able to preach what I believed in and not care in any way how I crafted my message. And that's a really important thing to do, is craft the message. And I would be very explicit, not that I'm dishonest now or that I hide anything that I believe in, but I don't start a conversation by saying, let's abolish the Department of Education. Anymore.
Thank you.
Sure. I was actually just getting to an example, and it wasn't even at UMass. No problem. I appreciate input. I was getting to an example because, as Matt said, this is bigger than UMass. I started to take this above and beyond just UMass. I brought it to other colleges. I brought it to Tea Party groups. I brought it everywhere. And one of my favorite examples was when I went to Boston for the premiere of Atlas Shrugged Part 2. Just a disclaimer, terrible movie.
Oh, come on!
I love the books, but the movie didn't measure up. It didn't measure up. It got something right. What it got right is the basic.
It's the second act of a third act play.
Right. Okay. So why is it significant? Because afterwards, I went out in the theater to all these people that had just watched the movie, and I passed out books. The theater gave me permission to do that, believe it or not. I passed out books, mostly copies of Atlas Shrugged or samplers with excerpts from Ayn Rand's works. And one of my favorite conversations ever was when I came across a group of middle school girls. and I offered them a copy, and one of them was like, I don't read. I don't even like reading. And and the other two kind of looked baffled that someone was offering them a book in a movie theater. But one of them asked me, what's it about? And, well, it's a fair question to ask when someone offers you a book in a movie theater. And I said, I don't remember verbatim what I said. Basically what I said is that it's a book about productive, creative people who want to make the most out of their lives, but no one else appreciates them, and they want to be in control of their own lives, or something to that effect. I didn't say this is about people who go on strike and who it is. I don't say that it's about being libertarian, or I don't go into details about Ayn Rand's philosophy, because I wanted to use the most general terms applicable and understandable to the majority of people. So I said that, and the girl who had just said, I don't read, she turned to me, and I saw a light in her eyes, and she said, you know, I can actually relate to that. Can I grab a copy? So this approach has really helped, and it has helped me to get a lot of attention on campus and outside of campus. I grew the mailing list. Thanks to some help from these guys from Students for Liberty, who I'll introduce after, I was eventually invited to speak at the Students for Liberty conference. I just secured a speaking engagement at the New Hampshire Liberty Forum. I've gone to a bunch of different clubs and handed out books and got more people interested, and I've gotten more and more people to be genuinely interested, and I've seen a light go on in more people's eyes than I used to. And that's how I measure success. I don't measure success by the number of people that used to go to the meetings that I no longer hold, because I put all this effort into it, and these people just didn't read the ideas. But when I told them, oh, your life belongs to you, take control of it, and here's a philosophy that'll help you do it, that's what resonated with them, and the interest exploded. We have 400 likes on Facebook, and people know the term, and people who I've never met will be like, oh, you're that objectivist. The objectivist. I don't know how I got that, but all right. I'll take it. Oh,
That's yours, Steve.
oh, thank you.
It's Jack Masso. I know you don't drink, so do well.
So I want to give you some more concrete examples to show you just how much success I and we have had in the recent past, and how we can capitalize that and where we can work together on that. So I started hearing from more and more people who shared my values and wanted to be a part of it, and in a lot of cases had more resources than I did. I reached out to all these different organizations. I had a support system that I was partly my doing and partly not my doing, because people started coming to me. And without the support from groups, organizations like the Ayn Rand Institute and Students for Liberty and Young Americans for Liberty, I wouldn't have had as many resources as I had to reach out to more people. And that's really important, because there are all these student groups that don't have that kind of support, and they could use your support. Not necessarily financial. The most important kind of support they could use is moral support. And that's the kind of support I got that really helped me along. And one of the most recent examples was when these two guys from Students for Liberty drove all the way to UMass from Eastern Mass and said, what can we do to help you? Here's some things you can help us with. And, you know, it was a stressful time. I couldn't come up with anything right away. But we ended up working together to plan an info session at UMass about Students for Liberty and about the then upcoming Boston conference. We got 13 people out of the 13 people who went to that meeting, to be really genuinely interested in what we're doing. Something like 3 or 5 of them wanted to be campus coordinators. 8 of them actually went to the conference. You know how many people went to the Students for Liberty Boston conference last year? No. 1. It was me. You know how many people from UMass went to the International Students for Liberty conference from UMass?
1.
Yeah, it was me. I could give other examples, but this year 8 went. This year. And they came back and they were passionate and they had all these ideas in their head and evidence that those ideas are correct. So we cover theory and we cover practice, and that's the winning combination. And these students came back with a perspective that they hadn't been presented with ever by their professors, their parents, their churches, if they're religious, or any kind of support system or adult influence they've ever had. They were just never told that liberty is a legitimate thing, and that it's a value that we can actually learn more about and defend, and that that the term isn't the monopoly of any party, that it's a universal value. So that's how I know that what I've been doing, what Students for Liberty, what all these other organizations have been doing is successful. But I'll remind you again that part of what makes us successful is moral support from people who have been through it before, and financial support. But believe it or not, the moral support is actually more important to me, and it's what's gotten me further along. And frankly, in general, there hasn't been a ton of it. I'm not saying not from you guys, I'm not saying from any group in particular, I'm saying in general there's not a lot of support for what we do from people outside our own circles. You know, my parents will nod their heads and say how proud they are because I'm being productive, but they don't get it. My professors, the more neutral ones, will be like, oh cool, you're an active kid. They don't get it. Most of the professors will scoff and want to find me in my sleep and kill me, but aren't allowed to. And a whole lot of fellow students, think that I'm their enemy by default, and they just don't want to hear a different perspective. But I had the moral support from groups like the Ayn Rand Institute and Students for Liberty, and a few people here and there who said, I've been through that before, what you're doing is good. So I'm going to go over a few things real quick about how you can help us with that. And I'm going to drink more water first because I feel gross. Yes, in Amherst. Does anyone have like a fire grenade or something?
Let's do it.
You know, since you asked about Amherst, I'll say a couple things about the town real quick.
Oh, yeah, I know about it.
I bet. So, actually, there's really not much to say about the town of Amherst. There's more to say about UMass. And I wish I had hours to give all the examples of all the terrible experiences that I had, but I don't. But I will say that there are a lot of professors that openly encourage students to walk out of the class and to be occupiers, and to pitch tents on the library lawn, and to just spend their time insulting productive people and scoff at students who question them. But I already went into detail about that. The point is, I worked in a difficult context, and we all are going to do that. We all have been doing it. It's really not an obstacle, though, if we really do share the values that we say we share, and if we're willing to work together on it. So, what we're doing right now, we're doing a bunch of things right now. And Dan and Nick can maybe say a couple things in a few minutes. We're doing a bunch of things right now. The nearest thing is we're taking students to the International Students for Liberty Conference. Every year, this conference has exponentially more attendees. Every year this organization, Students for Liberty, has exponentially more numbers. You guys can go into more details, but in 5 years, this organization that came from nowhere basically got a ton of big name funding and grassroots support at the same time, and they grew dramatically. And they reached out to students around the world and established over, I don't know, like 1,100 chapters or network of member organizations, something like that, in every continent. They've reached everywhere. They just had a conference in Nigeria. All right, so this organization is growing, and granted, my approach is a little bit different than what Students for Liberty usually takes, but working together with them has been one of the best decisions I ever made, because their reach, their energy, their passion is amazing. And when I went down to the International Students for Liberty Conference, I met people from all over the world who have come from similar contexts. I met people from Venezuela who put together an underground, well, not actually underground, but secret conference, that kind of underground. And I think I remember hearing that they were still assaulted by Hugo Chavez's thugs.
They just barely, they attended the conference when they actually came.
Okay. Yeah. And they're popping up everywhere. They're in Portugal for some reason, and I was just there over the summer. And I had lunch with the people who are starting chapters there. And I'm just amazed at how quickly this organization is growing. And when I went to Washington, I got to see that my contribution at what I'm doing is valued, and that what we're all doing together is making real change at the local, state, national, and international level. And
Very proud.
thanks. Thanks, man. I met a lot of great people. I got a lot of business cards, all that jazz. And it was a great experience socially too. Met a ton of camps coordinators from other countries, got to practice Spanish, It was fun. And now, finally, we're getting more and more students interested, thanks to help from these guys, and thanks to this great organization, and also to Young Americans for Liberty, which now has over 500 chapters in the U.S., and they're growing very quickly. Thanks to these organizations, more students attend these every year. More students get to understand the ideas of liberty and find about opportunities to put those ideas into practice. So we don't dispense with theory or with practice. We learn about the ideas. Frankly, objectivism is a great way to give a foundation to your belief in liberty. But that's not the route everyone takes, unfortunately. But a lot of people get exposed to Ayn Rand's ideas this way, and a lot of people get exposed to Hayek and Friedman this way, and a lot of people get exposed to just different voices this way. And then they find out about people like Justin Amash or other people, well, now he is a representative, but other people who put those ideas into practice. These organizations are already important, and what they're doing now will be significant for thousands of years, literally, because they're planting a seed. They're not just changing the electoral map, they're changing the culture. That's why it's important to get students down to DC. Now here's the problem. They're college students. They're poor. I'm poor, even though I wear a money pin. Have to know what it's all about. And they could really use some help. So what I'm going to do is pass around this notebook in a minute. And gonna ask for a few things. I can't obligate you to donate or to do anything really. What I really want is just your name and your email, maybe your number if you're into that, and tell me whether or not you're on Facebook. Because we're growing the network. We're growing the network of people who we can turn to and say, we want more support for these students, or say we want more support for this person, this pro-liberty Republican running for state rep, or whatever. We're growing the list, and I really want to be able to keep in touch with all of you because we ultimately share the same values and we want the same thing in the long run. Now, when you do give me this contact information, there are a few things I'm going to send you, and it will be your choice whether or not you indulge. I'm going to send you links to the Facebook pages of Students for Liberty, Young Americans for Liberty, and the International Students for Liberty Conference, the New England Objectivist Society, which is what I've started, maybe a few others. If you're on Facebook, I'd like you to like them. And I'd like you to ask your friends to like them, and I'd like you to ask your friends to ask their friends to like them, and so on. It sounds, if you just do that, it's slacktivism. But if you do that in combination with the other stuff I'm going to say and what you're already doing, it's hugely important. So there's that. I'm going to introduce you to some of the other student leaders, some that are here and some that aren't here, who are doing some similar things to what I'm doing. And I'd like you to start inviting more of them to meetings like this, to rallies, to whatever, to anything you put on. And when they're there, especially the new folks, the newcomers, there are a couple of freshmen that are helping me out at UMass Amherst and UMass Lowell. I'd like you to show them that their contribution is valued and that they really are the future. They need that more than you might be able to really conceive of right now. It's hugely important. I'll also send you a link for something called Give the Gift of Liberty, which is Students for Liberty's crowdfunding platform to raise money for whatever Students for Liberty kids happen to be raising money for. In this case, it's to get people from New England, mostly Massachusetts, down to D.C., to the international conference, to meet all these other people doing the same things they are, to get a head start on something that I didn't get to do when I was a freshman, and to become more effective and to win this battle that we're all trying to win. If you can support us in any way, we'd all appreciate it. And since these are all poor college students who are trying to figure out how to pay registration fees, any amount is appreciated. John?
I'm waiting for you to be done, but I'll ask a question and make a statement after you're done, so I don't mean to interrupt you.
Okay.
Well, I just want to say
I'm
that.
almost done. I'm very
Yeah,
close.
yeah, no, I'm sorry.
Well, I just want to say that Nathan is just become a member of the Meat and Potatoes page on Facebook. He can. I'll be more than happy to send all of you the links. Just get on the page, Meat and Potatoes on Facebook, and I'm glad to have him on there. I can look you guys all up. We'll cross, copy, and paste. We'll send everything out.
Thank you. And I'd appreciate if you could all do that too. If you have a Facebook page or group that you could also share these links, that would be great. So I'll send you all these links. And I stress again that the most important thing is moral support. And what would be great is I'm going to tell you a little bit about, not right now, I'll tell you in the email about what some of these other students are doing. I just helped Young Americans for Liberty start chapters at UMass Lowell, UMass Dartmouth, Northern Essex Community College. I've been working with the one at UMass Amherst. I co-hosted a meeting with them. I got the Amherst Republican Town Committee, which was about to dissolve, to donate the rest of their funds to that organization so they can use for tabling. These organizations work together. They're unstoppable, but they still need help at the local level. So that's what I would like. It's not for me. I don't need the money right now. It's for them, but that will benefit me because I want there to be more like-minded people. I want there to be more people fighting this struggle. So all that being said, I'm going to shut up in the very near future. and I'll pass this around. And, oh no, I had an example I wanted to give. Oh, it was a thing about the Republicans in Amherst. I already gave it. So just keep all that in mind as you're writing down your contact information. And as, I'm sorry?
Is there any Republicans in Amherst?
There are.
Really?
There are.
They're hiding behind bunkers.
But, you know what they told me? What they told me is that they haven't gotten anywhere in the last few years. The person I met with said, these are her words, not mine, so I'm not trying to be offensive. She said, it's all old blood. She said it's all old blood, which is not a problem in itself, but the point she was making, thank you, the point she was making is that she felt disconnected from the overall movement. She didn't feel like they were being effective. She wanted to feel more effective, and she knew that she wasn't able to keep the town committee going on her own. And I told her about this new chapter starting up, and she jumped at the opportunity to support a student organization with ideals and energy. This isn't me. It's not my organization. It's part of the movement, though. So I'm going to pass this around. I really appreciate everyone to contribute here. I'm going to give whatever cards I still have. If I'm running out, I need to get new ones. And as you put down your contact information and as you read through the links I'm going to email you, I want you to remember that look that you occasionally see in people's eyes when you say something that they haven't thought of before, and they look overjoyed. And it's the look that I see when I tell people your life belongs to you. And with that, I'll leave you with a quote from Ayn Rand. Those who fight for the future live in it today. I think that's what it was. Those who fight for the future live in it today. We're fighting for the future. We can really use your help. Fight away.
Before you leave, first I want to thank you for speaking. You spoke so well at our event. You spoke so well today, and I want to thank you. Next, I'm going to make a suggestion and want to get your feedback on it, and then thirdly, well, that's it. Anyway, I think the portion of your presentation, I think that was the most important, is that we need to frame what we say to people in such a way that they can relate and therefore make the conversion from a collectivist idea to an individualist idea. And I had a website quite some time ago which didn't do very well, and I ended up stopped doing it, which the idea was for people such as yourself and Tea Party people to work together to understand how best to frame our position in such a way, as you describe, your life is yours, and this is a story about how people felt as if their life was theirs, and people felt as if it wasn't, and they were able to overcome that in some way. What are your thoughts on, because I think coming to a group like this and explaining what you need and asking for what you're doing is very productive, but the idea is not to preach it to 30 people,
Right.
but to 3,000 people or 3 million people.
Well, 30 people is fine if they're new blood.
Right, exactly right. So my thought is, okay, the most productive thing you can get out of tonight is how we can get the marginal people to move in and create more marginal people, then move more people in.
Well,
so what are your thoughts on fusing the Students for Liberty, the Objectivists, the other organizations into some sort of effort to work together in order to come up with the best framing of arguments so that when we go out and we speak to marginal people, we can pull them in with the understanding that we've looked at all the alternatives and this is the best way of doing it.
That's a great question. I do have something to say to that, but I also think that Nick and Dan might have something to say to that.
Okay.
If we can give them a couple minutes. But I will say, this relates to why I wear a dollar pin.
I bet.
The dollar to me doesn't signify making the most amount of money possible, which is fine. I like money. But the dollar to me symbolizes an exchange of values. It symbolizes shared values. So the reason I wear this Folks, I'm trying to answer John's question here. It's self-related, I promise.
The conversation's getting distracting, so we're almost done.
Thank you. So the reason I wear this dollar pin is part of the answer that I'm giving to John. And it's that this, to me, symbolizes an exchange of values, and that's why I wear it to events like this, is because I know that there are values deeper than just winning elections, which are important, but there are values deeper than that, which are individual rights. The most fundamental thing that makes this country what it is. And that is the most fundamental idea that we have to get across to people, and it frankly depends on the context. If you're in a classroom, in our case, and the professor is spewing nonsense, then it probably wouldn't be the best thing to get up and make a speech and take over the class. What would be good to do is challenge the professor's logic. Now, in the case of tabling, what I like to do is I didn't just give out books like toilet paper. I didn't just make piles of books that were unattended and let random people take them. I actually was very selective about who I gave books to, and to be honest, I tried to weed a lot of them out. And there's a reason for that, and it's because there are people who agree with me, but there are also a lot more people who could agree with me. And the way I would start talking to them is I would ask them something like, what are they studying? Because I would want to know how I can relate it to them. This is the case of college students, so it's different. And we could spend a whole meeting, a whole forum on how to market liberty. I'm just talking from my experience. And that resonated with a lot more students. And I could almost always bring it back to this message of, oh, so you want to do such and such with your life because you're studying this thing. You're pre-med, you want to be a doctor. You want to be able to do what's best for you and find the best education possible for yourself and save as much money as you can. And to be able to do that, you need more, other people should respect you and what you want to do with your life, or something to that effect. And you can do that with really any major. Turn people's ambitions not against them, but in your own favor. Now, in terms of them working together, and again, this is another thing that these guys, I'm sure, will have more, at least as much to say as I can, if not more. One thing we've been working on is there's a Facebook group that I think actually you guys started, or someone in Students for Liberty started, that is now called New England Liberty Coalition. And frankly, a lot of the people in that group are people I've never met or heard of before, which is a good thing, actually. And that brings together objectivist groups, libertarian groups, Students for Liberty groups, Young Americans for Liberty, conservatives, Tea Partiers, people running for state rep, or just someone who read Ayn Rand in middle school and wants to learn more. It brings together all these different types of people from different contexts, and that's the other reason I asked you to say if you have Facebook. I forgot to mention that, is because I want to add you to it. Do you guys have something to add to that?
Yeah, come on up.
So if I learned one thing tonight, it's to never speak after Nathan. I think my speech is a little late.
So what, you're going to let me speak first?
Excuse my time. So my name is Dan Morris, this is Nick Bonasaro. We are from Students for Liberty.
We're both campus coordinators, and what we do is we go to different schools across the New England region, and we'll tell them what resources we offer them. We'll help them plan events and figure out how best to add new people into the organization.
So we started in 2008 in the wake of the Ron Paul campaign. We started along with Young Americans for Liberty, the other organization Nathan mentioned tonight. Our main goal is, as Nick said, is spreading the ideas of liberty to colleges across not only New England, but the world. Nathan mentioned we have campus coordinators across the globe. One of my favorite locations we have campus coordinators in is China, or rather people that work with us. I'm not exactly sure how you can manage life as a libertarian in China, but some do. Actually, it's a little bit of a sad story, but I learned that we actually at one point got a request for resources from Beijing, of a student there. We sent them a box of books. It came back to us, beaten up. Pages were torn out, the box, but it was kind of sad, but at the same time, kind of exciting. It meant we were fighting for something. Nathan mentioned the students from Nigeria. A lot of students coming into that conference had to cross the border, and they were actually stopped at the border by guards who wanted to bribe them. And so students trying to get into Nigeria had to wait and actually call us to give them money to pay a bribe. And so while those stories are sad, they're exciting, because the money you give and other donors give goes towards fighting those good fights, towards helping those fight for freedom in China, Nigeria, Venezuela, and of course here in the States.
And there are a lot of benefits too to donating too, because one of the events that we were talking about, the International Students for Liberty Conference, if you're an alumni for Liberty, which means you give $10 a month, you get to register for free to go down to the event. It's going to be in D.C. Every year it's the biggest gathering of libertarian students in the world. And so last year we set the record at 1,400. This year we're expecting 1,700 people. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to raise funds for a bus to take what we're expecting to be about 20, 25 students down in D.C.
From all over New England. We actually have a couple kids in Vermont coming with us. And I thought Bernie Sanders had his socialist grip over Vermont, but I guess I'm wrong. So it's good to see that even there, the ideas of personal freedom and individual worth can spread. And so we have seen nothing but growth since 2008, as most any organization would. But it's been good growth and it's been rapid growth. We're very proud of that. And some of the things specifically we've done here in Massachusetts is we've held leadership forums where we gather leaders from various conservative groups, be they Students for Liberty, Republican clubs, or Federalist societies at law schools. We gather them at one place. We talk strategy. We have the question of how do you communicate these ideas of arguments for libertarians against it. It's those forums we have online. We have our Facebook groups where campus coordinators and SFL members can discuss with one another their ideas of winning an argument and what happens when you lose that argument and so on. On our Facebook group specifically, I know at least once a week someone will say, hey, this kid in my club asked this question, how should I address it? And we discuss what happened. And so we are very much on the forefront of fighting a fight of how do we communicate these ideas effectively, like Nathan talked about.
There's also our students that have the ability to write blog posts. Like me and another campus coordinator recently wrote a blog post about how we are advancing liberty by volunteering, and how that is a very persuasive thing to do, because you, by being a person who's a role model and showing people that liberty isn't just about these ideas, but it's about how you implement it, like Nathan is saying, you actually come off as libertarians are the people that want to take away the EBT cards from grandmothers and people that are poor, but people who want to help each other.
Yeah.
I want to do EBT.
That's a really good point.
And John, if I may real quick, Students for Liberty as an organization is basically the answer to your question. If you look at their list of member organizations in their network, very few of them say Students for Liberty. They say they're in a network with Students for Liberty. We have organizations like Students for Sensible Drug Policy, Republican groups, Tea Party groups, objectivist groups, and a ton of other stuff. We can come up with literally hundreds of examples because there are literally hundreds.
Yeah, but my thought was funneling that enthusiasm into some sort of portal in which we can discuss the best way to position arguments, so that you're not starting off with saying we got to end the NSED or the Department of Education.
Right.
But positioning it the way you position, which I thought was brilliant, in such a way in which we can bring people into the idea without scaring them away immediately. And the way to get marginal people is by sharing those ideas and finding those folks and pull people in, and making sure we're all using the best tools.
I just had a marketing class on this. So what you're talking about is the psychology.
I'm a marketing person, so yeah, exactly. And we're
There's a
talking about
psychology
marketing liberty.
principle by Carl Jung called emphatic listening.
Yeah.
So you just listen to what people say, you repeat it back to them, and that way they think, oh,
Empathetic
this understands me. Yeah, exactly.
One of the other ways we create that portal of arguments and whatnot is, and understanding is, every year we have a publication, we have a book.
This year it's Why Liberty. We printed 375,000 copies, and we're trying to distribute all of them to different schools and different students.
And so they pick those up and they read.
That's a great book. And what I really like about that book is it makes this complex idea, liberty, really easily understandable to the majority of people. It starts off by just saying, if you don't like to hit people, to solve problems, you're probably a libertarian, and it goes up to that. So, Students for Liberty is on the forefront of doing what you're talking about, and we'll all keep in touch so we can help each other in as many ways as possible.
We've got to kind of end here.
Anyone, I printed out some flyers for the Students for Liberty conference.
Great job. Great job. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Before we take off, a couple other things to say. I think we're about to get blown away by the open mic in the other room. First, I wanted to mention that if anybody's interested in James's book, Exporting Prosperity, he has them available for sale for $15. One other thing I wanted to mention is we have a celebrity in the room tonight. He's attended many of our meetings. He's not paying attention right now. Patrick, you're being
Come on, Patrick, get up here.
So, Patrick Humphreys has attended many of our meetings, but this is the first time attending as the newly elected president of the Greater Boston Tea Party.
Good evening, everybody. What?
Lied to me.
Oh, I was being coy.
Oh, all right. I'll take that.
Well, actually, when I took the position, I was not sure that I was going to be taking it because the 2 weeks prior to the when the decision was made, I worked an equivalent of 55 and 60 hours in 2 weeks before. So my life is crazy enough as it is. Now it's crazy. So, but this is an important process, and definitely you have to have people involved in this.
Everyone,
That's your place. Yes. One thing that I wanted to know about the Students for Liberty, if you go on the Give the Gift of Freedom webpage, you do need to look for their individual activities that they're trying to sponsor. There's one, right, there's a couple of direct links, one for the bus, and then there's a 200 general fund, I think, for the Boston area. So, I was going to ask that question. It is tax deductible, it's a 501c3. Excellent. Okay, so that's even a better reason to get it. So there's, I think there are 2 of them, one for $200 and one for $1,000. If everybody here gave just $10 each, they'd be well on their way. They blow apart the $200 one, and then you could get that bus going as well. Again, my name is Patrick Humphreys. I'm from the Greater Boston Tea Party. I've been out to the Worcester area a number of times. They were after the April 15, 2009. They actually had a tea party in June of that year, and I came to as many of these things as I can, and I love it out here. We do have meetings in the Greater Boston area 3 times a month, one in Boston itself at the rear. That's the first Monday of the month. Then there's the second Tuesday of the month where we meet in Medford, and then there's the third Tuesday of the month where we meet in Holbrook. And actually we're going to have this gentleman here coming to speak in Malden on the second Tuesday. That's the 14th. And we are going to try and get Nathan and some of his friends to come and talk, I hope in Boston at some point. I'm going to talk to them after this. Besides those meetings, there's also something that just came up within the last 24 to 36 hours. There's going to be a gentleman by the name of Michael Saltzman. He's going to be in Lexington, Mass. at the One Cranberry Hill, which is where they hold a Friday morning group. Wednesday, January 22nd. It's something that the Greater Boston Tea Party, Citizens Living Taxation, and the Massachusetts Fiscal Alliance are putting together. And this is talking about the minimum wage. I don't know if you've heard recently, but the pushing to boost the minimum wage in Massachusetts to $11. Make it the highest in the nation, and then also on top of that, tied to inflation. So, we're number 47 right now for business friendliness in the country. I think we're shooting for 50. So, there's a lot of good educational activities going on, and I encourage you to get out and visit them. And again, I'm open to any questions if anybody has any. That's about all I have to say.
Thank you,
But definitely, I'll put the flyers back here, thank you very much.
I want to thank you all for coming and thank our speakers. I think I saw a quote, sometime in the past year, it said, the Liberty Movement needs, a little less Ayn Rand and a little more Dale Carnegie, and it's interesting that the young people figured that out well before the Tea Party did. So,